Welcome to the shooting show. This week we attend a Norfolk pheasant shoot with a difference. The guns are using muzzleloaders. We travel back in time to see how it was done in former times. Plus Byron gets all technical and tests out Scott Country's latest night vision and thermal imaging equipment. We're off to the Burnwell shoot near Thetford in Norfolk, where the guns are gathering in eager anticipation of a day's sport. But this isn't your average pheasant shoot. We'll be walking up the birds over pointers and shooting with old-fashioned black powder muzzleloaders.
3 guns.
Mark Howard, and I'm head keeper and shoot manager and proprietor of the shoot and have been for the last 26 years. So, yeah, I know the place a bit. We have one a year, and really enjoy it. My uncle put me on to this team because they all shot together at Lakenheath on the black powder, and now they booked up a day and they've been coming ever since. We have quite a bit to do with pointers, hunt point retrievers, so that worked in really well. The dogs seem to go with the shoot and then the shooting with the dogs, so that works all right. We took a stroll across to a piece of set-aside and just pushed out a few pheasants out into give half the guns a sort of stand and half the guns a stroll. A day like today is very similar to a field trial, except you've got to have time between each shot to make sure they got time to load. Very similar to a field trial indeed. I mean, there's no complication with the day because it's easy and enjoyable, and yeah, the pressure isn't on quite so much as a 200 bird partridge day.
What would be a typical shoot here in the season?
Start very early on partridges, 200 to 300 bird days on partridges, normally 5 drives a day. And then we move on to pheasants beginning in October, a few pheasants, and slowly on to pheasants, and more or less finish, because we haven't got the woodland, so we more or less finish driven pheasants about Christmas, and then some walked up days in January.
As the team heads off for the next cover, we ask Mark for the lowdown on muzzle-loading guns.
I've never owned one. I don't think I'd want to, because I can't put up with all the fiddling about with the cleaning and the priming and all the rest of it. But it's nice to see someone else who is willing to have a go. And it, like I say, the most enjoyable thing is that really does suit the dogs. I suppose those dog breeds were being bred at the same time as these type of guns were being shot, and they just match each other so well. The pace is right.
We're walking through this piece of wood and that cover crop there, and I think we probably, I'm in the right here. I'm hoping we'll get pheasant coming out sort of to the right. I'm hoping so. There's some flying out now, you can see. There's some action, I think, here. Yeah. Hope so, anyway. And it's not raining, which is excellent. I've got an 1 1/8 in this, and most people use an ounce now for this type of shooting. Slightly larger shot. We always use sort of 6 shot for this sort of shooting as well, but you've got a muzzle velocity of over 1,000 feet per second. Not perhaps as much as 1,200 and 1,300 you get in the modern cartridge. It brings them down though, trust me. They don't have much evidence of that yet, but when you hit them, they come down. For a game, I don't think I want to go much beyond, say, 30, 35 yards. Most people think because of the delay with a flintlock, you probably have to give a lot more lead. But the funny thing is, if you've got a crossing bird and you've got the gun swinging, you actually pull the trigger just as you reach the bird, and you keep the gun moving, and it takes the time for the gun to go off. By that time, the gun's swung further in front of the bird, and that's how you get your lead. But it's very rewarding when you bring birds down with muzzleloaders, and even more so with the flintlock. I think it's worth 10 birds with a breech loader, I really do.
With this type of shooting, you can't place stops forward, and these wily birds are taking full advantage. The dogs hunt out the thick cover for any that have decided to stay put.
Did you get that?
Yes. That time.
I'm sorry, I'm the retriever today.
I've only got to 1 wad in between my shot and powder. A lot of people have felt wad plus a couple of card wads, so I can load quite quickly, Mum. Probably, I haven't actually timed myself. I can load quite quickly because I've got everything to hand. I've got the powder in files because it's such a wet day. So I've got my powder, which I keep the files in a cartridge bag. So I've got my powder charge in there. And I've got my wads and the cards in this pocket here, so I can just put the wad in. Then the shot is in this shot bag, which is around my shoulder here, it's full of shot. And you can get a charge out of there, a set charge, and I pour that down, then put a card over the top, and so it's quite quick, you know, because I've got everything to hand. You know, perhaps a cartridge gun would be a good idea. That's it, I think we're about there now, so I can just feel with the prick of the powder and it's actually backing up now, so I know. Okay, here we are, ready to go. Half cock.
Yep.
Okay. Pull it back to full cock when I want to fire it.
Lucy, well, she trialled her HPRs and has trialled them for a long time. Very much into her hunt and her horses and her dog work. Excellent dogs. Really good. I've known her for a long time, and again, that was when this team first came here. I said, look, Lucy, we need some help on this. We want to shoot over pointers. Would you come and give us a hand? And she thought that was a marvellous training opportunity for her dogs as well. A lot of people don't let the HPRs on the place, you know, because they do need a lot of ground, and some of them are a little unruly, but we're lucky because you know, we've got some good ones, and Lucy lends us a hand, does a good job. Great dogs, so it all works, all fits in nicely.
Dave, when I finally just got to cock the gun, I forgot to cock the gun to full cock, so that's why it took so long for me to shoot. Right, it came down. I was surprised at that. You guess it? Oh, I'm very proud of it.
Of course, with a muzzleloader you can't just slip out the cartridges when you break for lunch, so emptying the guns is quite a spectacle.
2, 3. November the 5th.
Volley over, it's off to the shoot hut for soup and sandwiches, and a chance to admire some of the lovely old guns in action today before heading back out for the afternoon's sport.
This is a Joseph Harkham, famous Scottish maker, absolutely top quality engraving, a real cracking good gun in beautiful condition.
Once again we start in the woods. Any birds that run forward will end up in the sugar beet, which we'll be walking up next. Out in the field we can really appreciate the HPR dog work, and they're doing a great job of it.
Yeah, I know, I got it, yeah. Lovely, very good. And again, you got it? Got it.
You can see why they're called HPRs. They really are hunting, pointing and retrieving with some style. The guns are getting into the swing of things too, bringing down the birds as surely as any modern breech loader. Finally, it's time to empty the guns for the last time today, and Mark decides to have a bang himself.
1, 2, 3.
Well, they're all smiling. So what can you say? I think they've had more shots than they have birds in the bag, but that's all part of it, and that's probably why I enjoy it, because to be honest, you get fed up with just shooting large numbers of birds, and the companionship and this side of it is rather nice. Just to have an easier day and just be out and be able to laugh at each other is good. Yes, please, and get the kettle on, okay?
The Norfolk boys keeping the traditions alive there. And now, the Shooting Show news.
This is the Shooting Show news. 2014 is the year of the wader. That's the latest announcement from the Scottish Gamekeepers Association. The SGA has dedicated next year to the preservation of ground nesting birds such as lapwing, curlew and plover. It will highlight the decline in these species populations and call for tougher action in their preservation. Research has shown that waders breed up to 3 times more successfully on grouse moors, owing to heather burning and predator control. More news in the next issue of Modern Gamekeeping. Clay shooters can win a shooting lesson with George Digweed if they vote in Clay Shooting Magazine's Nation's Favourite Playground poll. The magazine is currently searching for the best and most loved playgrounds in the country and in each region. Everyone nominating a ground will be entered into the prize draw. Send your nominations in using the form in the December issue of Clay Shooting, out next week, or visit www.clay-shooting.com. Voting closes on the 31st of December. The consultation period has begun for the general licences in Scotland 2014. Gamekeepers have spoken out against some of the potential changes, which might see a state's general licence rights revoked if there is good reason to believe crimes against birds have taken place. The SGA's Alex Hogg said this was not a legally sufficient basis to withdraw a licence, and the changes could have negative consequences that were not originally foreseen. The consultation is open until the 18th of November. Follow the link on screen to respond. Talking Stalking is the theme of a new event set up by Basque, taking place on the 16th of January at the Black Horse pub in Ashbourne. The Basque Deer Management team will invite stalkers for an informal meeting about deer stalking certificates 1 and 2 and other deer-related issues. Key members of the Basque Management team will be in attendance. More deer news in Sporting Rifle magazine. And finally, 2 Shooting Show stars have revealed their new books, released just in time for Christmas. Expert foxer and Sporting Rifle contributor Mike Powell has penned A Foxing Life with Gun and Rifle, into which he has distilled over 50 years of foxing knowledge. Also coming out is Wild Boar, A British Perspective, by professional hunter and boar farmer Steve Sweeting, a boar book that uniquely focuses on the rise and subsequent control of the species in the UK. Both books are available to pre-order now from virtualnewsagent.com. That was the Shooting Show news.
We've travelled over to the west coast of Scotland to test some of the latest equipment to hit the market. I popped into Scott Country and they've kindly lent us some really interesting toys to play with, which we had out last night. We've got the latest night vision from Photon. We've also got a Pulsar thermal imaging unit, which has really impressed us quite a lot. And the latest addition to the Nightmaster range, which is a smaller tactical IR light. So if we take a look at the Photon night vision first, we'll see what really great value for money it offers. Like most new night vision units to hit the market, the Photon is digital, which of course means you don't have to worry about burning out tubes like you do with traditional night vision. Although this looks like a front-mounted unit on the front of a scope, in actual fact this is completely contained, and this is how the night vision unit comes. This has its advantages, whereas rear-mounted night vision, you often have the problem with your cheek coming too far off the back of your stock, and you have to put stock extensions on, or front-mounted units, which you then have to account for different bullet drop depending on the distances. This is very straightforward to use, and zeroing is very simple. Just like a traditional scope, take the turret caps off, you can bore sight it, and you just click it like you would do with a scope and get it on target. Eden and I went through this process yesterday. First shot on paper, a few clicks either way, and we soon had it grouping very satisfactory. There isn't a lot to the Photon. It's pretty simple to use. You've got your battery container at the top here. It takes 2 AA's. You probably want to use rechargeables, although we haven't actually found it that bad on batteries, and we haven't run out with the bit of shooting that we did last night. This is the built-in IR unit, which I have to say isn't that great, and that's why we've been using an external infrared illuminator, but that's the case with a lot of digital night vision, so there's nothing new there. And of course, this is how you attach it on the side here. This came with the Nightmaster unit, and there's a weaver rail attached to the side of the Photon. We took the Photon out at night to fully test its capabilities. First, with its built-in IR illuminator at 3 ranges, then with the Nightmaster 400. On this side, there's a ridged wheel, and this has 2 functions. If you turn it just a little way, you'll hear it click, and that actually turns the unit on, and continuing to turn it varies the brightness levels, which is quite important for getting a nice, clear picture. You will see on the side there are 2 ports. Well, on this one, there's actually only one because this is a demo unit. The port that we have is a video output port, but on the production models that will hit the market, there will also be a port which will allow you to attach an external battery unit. And finally, we have on the front the focus ring, which is a little bit like a parallax wheel on a scope, in that it just allows you to adjust the crispness of your picture depending on the distance. So that's all with regard to the actual night vision itself, but there is one last thing on the scope. You'll see just on the side here, there is another turret, and this changes the brightness levels of the illuminated dot inside. In terms of pricing, the Photon offers incredible value for money. At less than £400, it opens up the world of night vision to the vast majority of hunters out there. We had it out in the field last night and used it quite extensively, and were very impressed with what we found. In terms of limits to its capabilities, I would say 150 yards is about as far as you'd want to take it, and that's assuming that you're using an aftermarket illuminator like a Nightmaster. If you take it back to 100 yards, you'd be very comfortable taking shots at that range. The image quality isn't quite on a par with an N750, but then you wouldn't expect it to be. There is a vast difference in price between those 2 units, but it really is pretty good, all things considered. One disadvantage of a unit like this is that you have to dedicate a rifle to it, but units that you can add to a day scope cost considerably more. There are a few aspects that could do with improving on the Photon, and the first is the on-off wheel, which also does the brightness, and this can be turned on quite easily by mistake, and certainly we found that when we were out, and that's the last thing you need. If you see a fox, you get down, you go to turn it on, it's already on and the battery's flat, so it could do with either being a little bit stiffer or an on-off switch in a different place. And lastly, the illuminated dot, although possibly useful, we never really used it, and the main reason for that is that the dot is very big, and if you're looking out at a target of say 100 yards like we were when we were zeroing it, which was about the size of a rabbit, the dot pretty much covered the whole thing, which does make shooting accurately at distance quite difficult. I've been very impressed with the Photon, as I've already said, and I think that in terms of night vision on the market currently, it's very hard to look past this, especially if you consider the money and what it's actually capable of. And I think I'll be hard pressed not to want to dig into my bank account and get one for myself. Last night, Eden and I were also field testing a very compact thermal imaging unit from Pulsar. A lot of people probably haven't had the chance to test any kind of thermal imaging devices at all, but will know what they're all about from watching television. And having used one over the last couple of weeks quite extensively, I can tell you that it would be an incredibly useful tool for tracking down a problem fox. Maybe morally questionable using it for deer stalking, but in the right circumstances it can really prove of a great benefit. We opted to use the external Pulsar battery pack instead of the internal battery carrier. It's pretty straightforward. It just attaches to a weaver rail on the side, and you can see where the jack point is just underneath here. Operation is very straightforward. There's an on button at the front. You hold that down, make sure your lens cap is on, and eventually the screen should light up. Once it's lit up, you hold down the calibration button for a second until it says calibration at the bottom, and this will just set up the unit. Now, it's very important to do this before you drop the lens cap, otherwise you end up with a lot of lines across your screen. And once you drop the lens cap, you should see all your heat sources exposed. Now, there are 2 settings in terms of heat sources, and this front button here is what allows you to alter that. And if you hold it down, you'll be able to see that all your hot items turn from white to black, and hold it down again changes it back. And depending on the terrain and your eye, sometimes white sources are picked up easier, sometimes black heat sources are picked up easier, so you just need to experiment and see what works best. That front button also has another function. If you just press it as opposed to hold it down, it also zooms it in 2 times. And you will notice that you do lose some of the definition when you zoom it in, but it can be quite useful if you're just trying to pick up an outline at slight distance or something hiding in a bush. One of the most important variables that you need to be able to adjust on a thermal imaging unit is the brightness level of your heat sources. And you do this on the Pulsar by turning this wheel at the front here, which is quite easy to adjust just with your pinky finger. Now, rotating this left and right, you will see that the contrast between hot and cold increases and decreases. This can be particularly useful if you want to get a feel for the landscape that you're looking across, in which case you'll make everything quite bright and you will be able to work out definition and depth across the land. If, on the other hand, you're trying to pick up a heat source in thick foliage, what you want to do then is increase the contrast to its maximum level. So in the case that we have it right now, where hot heat sources are picked up white, everything else pretty much turns into a black mass. And with that set, any heat source that's hiding in there comes across as a bright white dot. As you can see, this unit is fairly simple to use, and the only thing I haven't shown you is this ring at the front, which simply focuses the image that you're looking at. They've got a lot right with this thermal imager, and the only aspect that I would change is where the calibration button is located. I did find myself on 1 or 2 occasions pressing it by mistake when I was trying to zoom in, so that was a little bit annoying. And also, if you turn the unit on and off more often than not, we found ourselves having to recalibrate it, which was a little bit of a pain, but it doesn't take that long to do, so it's not too much of an issue really. In terms of range capability with this, it was quite incredible how far we were able to pick up heat sources. Certainly beyond 1,000 yards you'd be able to pick up a heat source, but not necessarily be able to work out what it was. We were clearly seeing the outline of a roe deer beyond 300 yards, which is really all the capability that you need it for. If you've never used thermal imaging before, it can take a bit of getting used to, and you'd be quite surprised what comes up as a heat source. Certain types of terrain can also be quite challenging, and that's something that we found out last night. Where we were was quite rocky, the day before had been warm, and scanning across the ground there wasn't a lot of difference between the heat source from a rock and the heat source from a roe deer. But as the hours went by and the surrounding terrain cooled down, picking out the heat sources that we were interested in became easier and easier. Now, a unit like this costs just short of £4,000, which is a lot of cash, so I imagine that most of these will find use by professionals. And it will certainly be interesting to see what happens as the years go by and the technology improves, to see if this becomes as affordable as night vision has now become.
Well, that's it for this week. Thanks for watching. We're out every Monday, 7:30 PM UK time. This is The Shooting Show.